You're listening to episode 9 of the Confident Rider podcast with Jane Pike. Hi team, welcome back to the Confident Rider podcast. This particular session is a recording of a live clinic I did recently at the Western States Horse Expo in Sacramento in California, and the topic of the day is dealing with fear in the saddle. I would love to know how you find it, so feel free to get in touch and let me know your thoughts. But without any further delay, let's get into it now. Okay, so this is such a fascinating topic, and I know that it's one that we all resonate with in some shape or form because the experience of fear is a very human condition. That's the reality of it, and it's not one that we really want to ever get rid of or cancel out. But the relationship that we have with fear and the mood states of fear, which are anxiety, worry, rumination, tends to be quite an unhealthy one. And we see our experience of fear as something that represents cowardice or a lack of bravery, or we're somehow flawed in some way. So there's this really intrinsic dynamic flow that happens between our experience of fear or the mood states of fear and our sense of worthiness and our feelings of possibility about what that might mean. And what generally happens is that we move from sacrificing our innate creative capacity, which is how is it I'm feeling, what does this information mean to me, and how am I going to apply that moving forward, to being reactive and defensive and shutting down and trying to protect ourselves both emotionally and physically. So the way that I want to start is kind of in a way that you may not be expecting, which is to actually highlight the really positive benefits of fear and to start to have a conversation with you all about emotions from a slightly different perspective, which is all emotions serve us, all emotions are useful, and there's really no such thing as a positive or negative emotion. There's only a positive or negative relationship with an emotion. So fear in and of itself is our intuitive and instinctual energy. That is the free-flowing state of fear. So if you are in a healthy relationship with fear or have a healthy understanding of fear, you recognize it as something which sharpens your intuition, which really alerts you to the possibility around you, and which narrows your focus to the task at hand. So every time you've had an intuitive understanding about something, every time you've felt an instinctual response or felt alert or on form, that is free-flowing fear. That is your healthy relationship with fear. And the other coexisting narrative or story that comes up in response to this is that somehow it's related to the primal part of our brain, as if that's also a deficit or something that we want to get rid of. However, what we have there is access to millions of years of resources and information and energetic exchange from everyone that's come before us about how it is we need to respond in certain situations. So what we've developed as a culture generally is a disassociation between our intuitive intelligence and our emotional intelligence, and what we've held to the forefront is our logical intelligence. And we get stuck in our logical intelligence. What I mean by that is thinking and analysing and rationalising things is something that's very celebrated in our culture. You know, all of our workspaces are really analytical and they really appreciate that kind of intelligence. And so it's something that is really strongly developed throughout the educational system, throughout the school system, and then we get into a workspace and that's something that's really appreciated. Emotional intelligence, intuitive intelligence, is seen as untrustworthy. It's watery, it's a bit girly, it's feminine, it's something that's not reliable. And so we have been taught out of our innate capacity to understand the messages that emotions are offering us and the warning signals that they give us that allow us to respond in a really positive and constructive way early on in the piece before fear becomes a mood state that's destabilizing and completely incapacitating, which is what we recognize as fear. If we were to talk about fear, in the saddle or otherwise, and I was to get you to describe it, you would be describing the very extreme experience of fear that is further down the line of all the warning signals that started early on in the piece. Does that make sense? And it's the same with our horses. Once you understand horses from a behavioural perspective, you start to recognise the very subtle signals of discomfort or alertness that is related to that innate survival instinct that then allows you to channel that energy positively and create connection and impulsion, if you like. But if you ignore that and you suppress it, the message gets louder because it's not something that you're able to suppress. It's a natural, free-flowing energy that if you ignore the initial warning signal on the dashboard of your car and you keep driving the car, it's not like the signal goes away because you didn't notice it. All of a sudden there's steam, all of a sudden there's smoke, all of a sudden you're very reliant on your AA card, which I know sounds, my AA is like the Automobile Association, it's not like Alcoholics Anonymous, just to clarify that. But this is the reason why I have these memberships, because the warning light on the car of my dashboard makes very little sense to me. But I know when I turn the ignition on and it doesn't work that I have to call someone. So this is the sort of relationship we have with our emotions. You know, we start to shut down that intuitive side of us, which leads to an immobilization, and then we become reliant on people to fix us because it feels like we're incapable of fixing ourselves. So the four intelligences that I refer to and that I start all of my work from are this understanding that we have an intuitive intelligence, an emotional intelligence, a physical intelligence, and there's one other which I'm completely forgetting at the moment. It's going to come to me. Logical, that's the one that we all have the most of, and I'm like, what is it? Logic, yes. So when we are in balance with all of those four things, let's say that we are scanning our environment and we have this feeling about something. That's our intuition. It's our first warning signal. Then we have a thought process about it. That's our logical intelligence kicking in. And then we have a feeling in response to that. So those three things are working in flow at that point. Now, where we get stuck is we think about something, and then we think about something, and then we think about something, and we don't action it into physical intelligence, which is that ability to take the information that's offered to us, to translate it into a decision, and to action the decision. We're not very good decision makers. We don't want to get things wrong. And we get immobilized by this fear response, which actually traps energy in our body and then causes us to go into kind of like a shutdown state. It's like a shutdown horse. So if you think about those states of fear in their very extreme manifestation, we have fight, flight, and freeze. And you'll be able to recognize those things within yourself as a tendency. You know, all of us have a tendency, just like our horses do. Some of them are more prone to flight. You know, when the pressure comes on, they kind of want to get out of there if you put them into a situation where they feel like they're not able to respond effectively. Or some of them will just be like, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. And we're like that as people. You know, we have a tendency to either want to just get out of there, like that anxiety response makes us want to flee, or we're just like, I'm just going to pretend that nothing's happening right now and I'm going to be completely ineffective. So this is how we get into these situations that create cycles within us. Is this making sense? Yeah. So fear really is asking the question, what is the next best step forward right now? Or what is it that I need to be aware of? And the other thing that I want to highlight here is fear has an intrinsic relationship with anger and frustration. If you have a tendency to be stuck in a fear state, chances are you feel angry or frustrated, if not just with yourself, on a regular basis. There's an intrinsic relationship between those three things. Does that resonate with any of you? Like if you're feeling fearful, you get kind of pissed off that you're feeling fearful, and then it's frustrating because you feel like you can't do the things that you want to do. So if we were then to think about the positive message of anger, which sounds really crazy, this is like the emotional warning signal going off in the background. It's like, if we pay attention to the car alarm, we can stop something else happening. So if you were to think about the positive message of anger, anger is about boundaries. So as soon as you feel angry, you feel like you have been breached in some way, either emotionally or physically. And a poor relationship with anger is essentially a poor negotiation of boundaries. It means that you're constantly allowing someone or something to take advantage of you for some reason, and it's making you pissed off, but you don't feel like you have enough assertive energy to actually reinforce that boundary. And shame and guilt are actually a manifestation of poor physical boundaries. So if you feel shameful or you feel guilt about something, it's a call for you to check that your behavior is in alignment with your actions. And when your behavior is out of alignment with your actions, you might feel ashamed or you might feel guilty. And that is a really good, in some instances, recognition process to say, hey, I need to kind of come into line with what I'm doing here, or something's a bit out of sync with how it is that I'm behaving. So anger is like the external manifestation of shame and guilt being the internal manifestation. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is when we're in a healthy relationship. This doesn't mean then that we're like constantly berating ourselves or beating ourselves up, but this is that intuitive feeling of like, I did something and it's not quite what I want to do. And so now I have this logical understanding of what that is. I feel a certain way, and I'm going to act in accordance with making that okay, and that cycle completes, and then we move on with life. What happens is that we tend to get stuck in that place, and we don't actually keep the flow happening, and so we keep beating ourselves up and we keep beating ourselves up. So the reason this relates to your horse riding is because this is a really key part of the immobility cycle of fear. We aren't decisive, we aren't listening to our own signals, and we allow other people to tell us what we should be doing at certain times. And the other thing to be aware of is that if we have a poor relationship with fear and anger and frustration, other people also have a poor relationship with fear and anger and frustration. And not many people have the ability to hold space for that. So coaches can get really kind of upset and frustrated because they don't really know how to deal with that, and it feels uncomfortable. And we just want to kind of get on with things. So I'm not of the man up and take a concrete pill mentality. I think that is actually doing you a huge disservice. But what I want you to start to think about in this instance is, what is the positive message that my fear is trying to tell me right now? What is it that I can get out of this that will allow me to actually create some kind of emotional alchemy where I'm actually making something better of this experience rather than feeling disabled and dishonored by it? And the key realization within that is very much related to the shame cycle, because when we feel fearful, we tend to retract and recoil and disconnect. And we are tricked into believing by the itty bitty shitty committee that we are the only ones that feel this way. You know, I'm the only one that's afraid. And I have a membership program called Joyride. And when people sign up to the group, I tell you time and time again, they are so surprised that other people feel like this, right, Susie? It's like a revelation. And that you feel anxious? I thought I was the only one. Because the story that we tell ourselves is, I'm like this and everyone over there is qualifying for the Olympics. And I'm still trying to get on my horse. And Facebook is a magnificent machine for creating that reality. So is Instagram. You're like, look at that filter of success that she's used over there. You know, we all do this. So it's very much the story that we tell ourselves. So if we were to get practical now, we want to think about this from two different perspectives. If you identify with fear, I really encourage you to not berate yourself and beat yourself up, but to say, there's really positive benefit to this. I can have a positive relationship with this emotion and any emotion. And actually losing the labels of positive or negative allows me to step out of the story and create something different. So the first question I'm really interested in asking people is your fear valid? Like, is this a valid fear that you have right now? Because the difference between us and someone who plays golf or who plays tennis is that we don't exert full control over what it is that we are in relationship with. We are in a dynamic relationship with this incredible, conscious, beautiful, powerful, potentially dangerous creature. That's the reality. And if we aren't in a position where we're competent enough or skilled enough to be able to offer them what they need from us, then maybe you have a valid fear. And this is it doesn't mean it's the end of the road. It means, what do I need to do to be able to manage this relationship effectively and confidently and safely for the both of us. So that splits the strategy into two different arms. Is my fear valid? Your fear is valid if you are in a situation with your horse where you do not feel like you are competently able to bring you both to a safe place in the training experience. If you are rearing, bucking, bolting, taking off, feeling, it doesn't even have to be some of those big ones. It can just mean your level of competence isn't adequate at the moment to deal with what it is that you're experiencing. And your horse may have a set of dynamics of their own, because often what we're dealing with, especially with horses off the track or horses that have had a history, there's a level of trauma that they're processing themselves, yeah? And we have to be as empathetic to that as we are to our own trauma. And this is often where we get attracted to damage in a way, because we empathise with that on some level. But that question, is my fear valid? If you are in a position of experiencing valid fear, I would say you need to reach out to someone who can help you with that. And this can be the most transformative element of the journey. I mean, how many of us have been put into contact with people with a far greater skill set than our own as a result of going through something we wish we'd never gone through? That was the catalyst for actually getting to this place of getting help. And for me, as a coach, I'm constantly looking for people that I can refer people to. I'm like, this is someone you need to talk to, this is someone you need to talk to, because the horse element is so important and so enriching in terms of the training and the skill set that you overlook that to your own detriment, in my opinion. And I'll be perfectly straight up about that. I can't make you confident to get on a horse that's dangerous. I can't make you confident to get into a situation where you are not safe. Because the reality is your fear is a protective mechanism and it will override anything that I tell you to do in those instances. So what we're dealing with today, this is the disclaimer, is a situation where I'm going to assume you can competently engage in a relationship with your horse and your mindset is the factor that needs to be paid attention to. Yeah? Is that kind of, yeah. So how do we start from that place? The two things that we can break down and that often get meshed together are competency and confidence. They're two separate things. So competency is skill set, and that's time dependent. That means in order for me to be able to do this specific move or specific skill base with my horse, I need to spend X amount of hours in the saddle, and I need this instruction from these people helping me. Mindset is my ability to believe that I'm able to follow through on what it is that I'm setting out to do. So you can be a confident beginner. We mix these two things up because we think that if we aren't able to do all the things that we should or want to be able to do, that we can't feel confident. But to me, confidence is a feeling of resourcefulness. It's the ability to ask for help. It's the ability to recognise that I want to do this and yet I can't do that right now, but that's only because I haven't learnt this, and this yet. So it's not saying to yourself, oh, I can't do that, therefore I'm useless, therefore I'm never going to be able to do it, therefore this, and this. Hi, Shelley. So it's like this cycle that initiates that where we think we need to be able to be skilled in order to feel confident. Confidence, not cockiness. Confidence is not knowing everything. Confidence is just the feeling that I'm able to apply myself to constructive benefit, yeah? And so you can do that with knowing very little. You can do that with knowing very little. And the beauty of this is that while skill set and competency is time dependent, confidence is a matter of changing your state, and it can happen from second to second. So if you don't believe that, I want you to have a think about a time where perhaps you felt really flat and down and out, and you think, oh God, another day, here we go. And then someone's rung you, or you've watched a clip of something online, and 2 seconds later you're laughing. And it's like, how did I go from that place to that place? That's just a change in emotional state. So you may not have felt confident very often, but that doesn't mean you're not capable of feeling confident. And the way that I approach it is I like to think of things logically because it makes it practically easier to apply. Yeah, so the way that I'm going to describe things is like an equation or a formula, but that in reality it doesn't exist as separate arms. It's all kind of interflowing. But for the sake of our understanding, because we are so logical and analytical, we're going to break it up like that. Does that sound okay? So the way that I like to describe your emotional state is as an emotional equation. And there are three main components. I kind of think of it as a triangle. So on one arm you have your focus, on the other arm you have your self-talk, and on the third strand you have your physiology. So those three things make up your emotional state at any one time. So when you're in an anxious or a fearful state, and this is generalizing, there's sort of various elements along the continuum that add up to this. When you're in a fearful state, your mind goes to a non-constructive place. That is you seeing the worst case scenario come to life, or a variation of. So if you're feeling fearful, you've created a mental impression before you even see your horse of something you don't want them to do, or you don't want them to do with you. And that takes your focus in a particular direction. Now, when we do that, we create a feeling state off the back of those thoughts that signals our body to respond in a specific way. And all of us are familiar with the physiology of certain emotions. So if I was to say to you, I would like you to make me anxious up here, to describe the physiology of anxiety, chances are you would instruct me to kind of close my chest a little bit and come forward, and my gaze would be looking down. I'd be kind of in that protective place, and chances are I'd be a little bit tight, and I'd also be a little bit sort of like fiddly. Anxiety is like an airy emotion that doesn't make you grounded and stable. We recognize it as like birds flying around. It's sort of like, if someone's anxious, they're kind of like got a lot of energy moving through their body, but they're not like dancing, they're down. And so the opposite of that, if we were to think of confidence, you'd also be able to instruct me into a confident physiology. And you would say, okay, so if we wanted to make you confident, what we could do is actually just lift your chest up a little bit so your breastbone was a little bit higher. You might open your shoulders so that your heart is open, and your gaze would be looking up, and you would walk in a purposeful manner. Anxiety has no purpose because it's spinning around on itself, so you tend to kind of not know where to go or where to start when you're anxious. Confidence has purpose, it has definition from A to B. So that's the physiology part of the equation. The other intrinsic part that feeds into the way that we look and feel is our breath. So when we're anxious, our breath is short and sharp and has very shallow rates. So it's, if you feel anxious, you tend to be breathing from the top part of your chest. A confident breath is slow and relaxed and calm and measured and has space. So we know that that's also part of the physiology of confidence. If we were to think of self-talk, and self-talk is different from the white noise chatter in your head. Self-talk is the way that you intentionally talk to yourself, yeah? So self-talk is usually, the itty-bitty shitty committee, that's what I refer to, is the little voice inside your head that is negative. It's like, whatever, you can't do that, you don't even know what you're doing, like you've felt fearful before, you might as well just give up now. Those sorts of things. And we also tend to speak to each other in what I refer to as low-quality questions. So low-quality questions give you low-quality answers. And the reason for that is that we're always wanting to prove ourselves right. So if you go out to the horse and you've got the physiology of like fear and anxiety and you're feeling kind of like a little bit antsy and your focus is like, we swear a lot when we're like that, so I'm going to make it real, shit, like I really don't want to go out there and do this, and it's looking like a storm's coming in. I don't know if I should do it today, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. It's probably better to set myself up for success and do it tomorrow. And actually, I've got that call at 3. I've got to pick the kids up at 3:30, so I've only got 4 hours to ride. Maybe it's better. We have these kind of conversations with ourselves. And then actually, it's Thursday. I like starting things at the start of the week, and then I can get a run through. So maybe I'll leave it till Monday. Monday will be better. It feels better on Monday. But the example of low-quality question is, why is this happening? Why does this always happen to me? What is it, like, why do I always feel this way? And when you ask those questions, your mind goes, right, why is this always happening to her? Maybe it's because you're not good enough. Or maybe because you don't really know what you're doing. Or maybe it's never worked for you, so what makes you think you're going to be able to do this now? And then we create this narrative which feeds on itself, which deflates us even further and takes our focus even further down. And we create momentum behind an emotion. So if you can think of emotions having like an emotional charge, basically, they have their own energy. And if you start an emotion at, okay, you're in miles, aren't you? At 20 miles an hour, and then you keep going down the line, like, and you think about it for another 10 minutes, think now you've got a 30 miles per hour energy and another 40 miles per hour in 10 minutes, and soon your emotion is going at 100 miles an hour, and it gets harder and harder to stop the further along the line that you go, yeah? And it's just because of physics. It's just you've given more and more energy to something, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it gets harder to stop. So this is where we get caught in lag time, where I will tell you these things, and you will go away and you will try to apply them, and it will be really hard. And the reason that it's hard is because you've spent a long time giving energy to emotions and thoughts that don't serve you, and they've created their own momentum. And it's like if you're driving along in the car at 100 miles an hour and you've been driving that way for a really long time, then all of a sudden you decide you want to turn right and you turn the steering wheel. What will happen is that at first that your gaze will turn, so there'll be like a change in energetic direction. You'll change the steering wheel, but the back end will flip out, and for a while you'll keep coasting in this direction, even though you're like, I actually want to turn that way, because you've created momentum. Does that make sense? This is where people quit. They're like, it doesn't work. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I've been trying really hard for like 2 days to do this, and my 12 years of negative thinking hasn't been cancelled out yet, and I don't understand. Because it's just physics, it's just the emotion of certain energetic patterns. And the other thing that happens is that neurons that wire together, fire together. Neurons that fire together, wire together. It's the other way around. Which means that the more you think a certain thought, the stronger that thought wave becomes, and the easier it is to default to. So you get very practiced at feeling a certain way. You get practiced at feeling anxious. You get practiced at being fearful. You get practiced at being whatever positive manifestation of that is as well. But the key is not to try to not be something. It's to actually just to start to cultivate a new way of thinking about things. And the reason for that is that we can't actually move away from something neurologically, we can only move towards something. Some of you will have done this with me before, but just to hammer that home, if I was to tell you not to think about a blue tree, and I don't want you to think about the green grass underneath the blue tree, and I don't want you to think about the little yellow bird in the blue tree, how does that work for you? It doesn't work, because you can't not think about something. You can only think about something else. In order to not think about a blue tree, you have to think about a red tree. And in order to not think about green grass, you have to think about a stick. And in order to not think about a yellow bird, you have to think about blue sky. So you can't not be fearful, you can't not be anxious, and you can't not be afraid. You can only be calmer, or you can only be more relaxed. And this is where the way that you describe how it is you are wanting to be is really powerful, because if I say, the most common thing that happens is people come up and say, oh, hi Jane, I hear you deal with like mind stuff and whatever, and they never know how to describe it, like psychology and whatever. Anyway, so I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to feel anxious anymore. And I'm like, okay, what do you want? Well, I just want to get out there and not have that feeling in my tummy and like not think of all those thoughts. I'm like, okay, great. So what is it that you do want to feel? Well, I wish my horse wouldn't spook, and I don't, we're so negatively geared. And if you can think about that being a launch pad, so you get to the situation where you're like, I'm going to allow this experience, which is actually a part of the way that we think. We're negatively wired because that just allows us to survive, basically. Like we're much more able to ensure our own survival if we're looking out for the things that are bad. But what we are in the middle of at the moment, I believe, and this is just my interpretation of it, is we've gone from a situation where survival instincts have been very necessary to actually being in a pretty blessed place where physically we're not in a lot of peril generally, unless we choose to put ourselves in positions which are threatened. So we're kind of in this creationary phase where actually we are free to create what it is that we want to experience, but we're still in the lag time of everything that came before, where we were required to really be on our absolutely instinctual level basis. And so we're transitioning out of that. We're trying to say, I recognise these are instincts that served me and worked for me. However, they were interested in me surviving, not thriving. And now I'm in a position where I can actually thrive. What that means is I have to change my mental makeup and change my neurological wiring to be what is it that I want to experience rather than what it is that I want to avoid. So having that place seems so inconsequential, and you're like, well, how does this help my fear in the saddle? It helps significantly because you are constantly signalling your physiology to respond in a different way through the thought patterns that you are having. And the interesting part of this is our horses don't have the verbal ability to verbally communicate with us the way that we are now. So their whole understanding of what it is we're presenting is based on sensory acuity, on what it is that we are presenting in terms of our whole aura, in terms of our whole physiology. And that starts with your intention. So your intention is the mental and emotional blueprint that you create of what it is you want to experience in your reality, yeah? So if I go out into the arena and my intention is to have a calm and connected experience with my horse, I have a mental movie that I play off the back of that intention. When I think about calm and connection, I see my horse going away around in a really relaxed manner. I see us in a really fluid and dynamic and peaceful relationship. I see myself negotiating challenges with ease and, flow. And that allows me to come in with a certain way of physically being. If I was to say, I really hope he doesn't go off his head today, in my mind, I see a mental movie of my horse exploding around the round pen. I see me feeling apprehensive about the fact I even want to get on. I see him reacting to things and me reacting to him reacting to things. And as I come in, even though that hasn't even been experienced yet, physiologically, I'm giving off all of those vibes, and that is what he feels. That is what he senses. So real connection is having your intention, your feeling, and your action line up. And you can be intentional about the wrong things, you just don't know you're being intentional. We're intentional all the time. So to think about negotiating fear, it's like, what is the message behind this? What is it that I should be listening to right now? How is that going to inform my strategy? Is it a skill set that I need to pay attention to? Is that the weakest link? Is my fear related to the fact that I don't feel like I can competently manage what it is that's being presented to me and I don't feel safe? Totally fine. Nothing to beat yourself up about. All of us have felt that at one time or another. It just means you might have to take a step back and actually make a strategy that incrementally moves you forward. Or is it that I have this constant feeling of self-doubt and negative apprehension that's setting us up to fail even before I get there, even though I know my horse is capable of doing what it is that I want to do, and I'm therefore presenting as the weakest link? If that's the case, then you think, okay, I have these three components of state that we talked about. I've got my focus. So what I need to do there is say, what is it that I want to focus on? What is it that I want? And you create a success definition for yourself that is 100% within your control. So it might be like, okay, let's incrementally build up. If I'm really afraid riding just generally, what I want to do is I am going to get on, and my definition of success today will be me being able to control my focus and be 20% better than I was last time. So it's not like I'm going to be amazing, this is going to be incredible. It's like, I just want to feel a little bit better than I was last time. And that will represent a positive progression towards where it is that I want to go. One of the techniques that we work with, some of you will be familiar with because you're in Joyride, is thought hopping. So if you think about the two the difference between feeling fearful and feeling confident, they're like a chasm apart. It's like standing at the Grand Canyon, you on one side and looking over and knowing that you want to be on the other side. If I say to you, okay, get out there and just say, I'm really confident and I can do anything, you're like, bullshit. On the inside. Like, you might say it to yourself, but it's like putting a cap on a layer of feeling that's not true. You know, it's like totally incongruent. You don't feel that. You can tell yourself you feel that, but you don't actually feel that. Like, and the feeling is what your horse responds to, because that's what they're picking up on. That's what you're emanating. So thought hopping is, the name of it came from when I was little, we used to have these really smooth lakes where I lived, and my dad would find really smooth flat rocks on the side of the water, and he would skim them across the lake, and it would go, and it would just hop. And so I thought, when I was thinking about this, I'm like, that's kind of how I want the thoughts to be. So you want to identify, what's my start point? Well, I'm feeling kind of doubtful and afraid, and that's okay, because I've, taken the message that I need from that. But where I want to get to is I want to feel a little bit more confident. And it's too much of a leap to be like, I'm going to feel super confident right now. It's so far energetically. It's like if you're feeling sad and someone's like, just be happy. You're like, and it's like, oh, it doesn't work because it's so much of a thing, So you want to thought hop your way across. And thought hopping is the gentle movement towards better feeling thoughts. Basically, you're wanting to search out a thought that feels better, and that the feeling shows you it's something that is in alignment with what it is that's possible. So I might be standing here and I'm going to hop my way towards confidence, and it might be I'm out here with my horse and I'm thinking, I don't want to get on. I feel really nervous and I don't want to get on. And so a thought hop might be, you know what, it's a really nice day and I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to be out here with my horse, because I've got loads of friends that would kill to own a horse and they don't. And so this is a really lucky position to be in. And so that feels kind of better. I think, okay, that feels better. And then the next step across might be, you know what, I'm putting all of this pressure on myself to do all of these things, when in reality, no one is actually asking that of me, and I am in charge of what it is that I actually do physically with my horse. So why don't we just get in there, start some groundwork together and see where it goes? And that feels better. And then I might hop across and go, let's start the groundwork, and then we'll just see how he responds, and if he's looking calm and relaxed, I'll put the saddle on, and if that's fine, then we'll go from there. And can you see how you've just started to you've taken the feeling and you're not forcing confidence or pretending to be anything, but you're actually just making movements towards better feeling thoughts. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's like little thought hops, and all of us can do this. And you might stop at the third hop and be like, I can't get any further. But you've made progress within that session. You've made progress from quite a disabling state towards a much more constructive and empowering state. So that's thought hopping. The other thing that's really helpful is we talked about those disempowering questions, is to start to get into the habit of asking yourself empowering questions. And empowering questions are obviously the opposite. And the thing to realise about empowering questions is that you don't have to know the answer. It's like you sending out the possibility that that answer exists, and then neurologically you start to search around for it. The way that I think of it is if I write a blog or an article, I save that article under a specific name, and I put it under the little folder titled Articles on my desktop, and I might save that articles folder to the Confident Writer folder on my desktop, and that's saved there, right? So I know that on the hard drive of my computer, that article exists. But if I just randomly bang the keys, it won't open up. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means I'm not going through the right steps to liberate the information that I need. So quite often, it's not that we don't know the answer, it's just that we get out there and we start banging around on our mental keyboard, hoping that the right file is going to come up, and it doesn't, because there's certain pathways that you need to go through. So empowering questions are the way that I think about you accessing the files that already exist in your mind that need to be opened in order for you to be able to complete the skill or do the thing that you want to do. And a question might be, what's the one thing I need to do right now to get me moving forward? What's the one thing? Or what does my horse need from me right now? This is a really good one because it takes the pressure off you and puts it onto your horse. Like, what do they need from me? And the way that I thought about that was actually to listen to a lady who was doing a presentation on public speaking. And she said that she used to feel really nervous public speaking until she said, actually, what does the audience want from me? And it took the pressure off her and onto the audience so that it was no longer about her. It was about them. What can I give them that will be beneficial or useful? And I think when it gets to riding, especially when we have a poor relationship with fear, we get a bit self-centered. Like, it gets all about us. And we forget, like, what they're going to do to me. Bugger that. Like, what are we doing to them? They're over in the corner thinking, here I am, I've been brought down, I can't speak. I'm in a pen. I'd rather be back there. And now she's freaking out about what I'm going to do to her. What about me? So it's a similar, I know that sounds ridiculous, but actually it's kind of the truth. So if you think, what do they need? What does my horse need from me right now? Is a really empowering and encompassing statement, because you're like, well, he needs me. I can see him over there, look at the nervous poos. He obviously needs me to kind of hold it together right now because I represent his feeling of safety, and right now I'm not that. I'm not his safe point. So I tell you one thing that's really helped me. And I apologise, a couple of stories are repeated if you've been here a couple of days. But over the last 6 months, I've been in the three to 4 years, but the last 6 months I've actually backed him. I started my own horse. And this is the first time that I've done that, the first time I backed my horse. And he's quite a big unit. He's like 17 hands and he's a warm blood, and he's no small fry creature. I thought I'd start with that. So I've had him since he was 2, and I love him. Like, I know you shouldn't say heart horse because they're all your heart horse, but I love him. And last year I almost lost him. We went through the starting process and he got very, very ill. I'll probably get quite emotional about this. And I thought I was going to lose him. And then he came back. He's like a little warrior of awesomeness, and came back. And so we picked up where we started off at, where we left off. And I'll be honest, like, I had that idea and I announced it to my membership group to hold me accountable. And then I thought, shit, like, what if I can't do that? And occasionally you'll see I'll see him in the paddock and I think, oh God, like, I don't want to get on that. Like, it's like bucking around, like we all do. We have this kind of like movie that goes around when you see them being joyful. So my strategy is to only go as far as the next good step. And that's what I keep telling myself. And the thing with fear and overwhelm is that we often, we're in the place that we are and we project ourselves to like way down the line, and that is the point that we are afraid of. And I tell you, this 100% works in that I only went as far as the next good step. And the thing that I 100% thought I would be anxious about, I was no longer anxious about, because I had spent so much time ensuring that the step before was solid that I almost could guarantee that the next step was going to be okay. So I have this joke that my own starting process with my horse is the longest road to the horse. It's like the opposite of the 3-day road to the horse. It's like 4 years. The reason for that is because I detached myself from the goal and I was so attached to the process. Like, we were doing the most incremental things that if I was to video it, it would look like paint drying. But I got so much joy out of that experience that it was just my own definition of success. I was detached from any result or purpose, and in terms of what other people expected. And that actual experience was so enriching that I no longer had a timeline about how long this was going to take. And I had I was sharing this publicly, so you get the people that are like, looks like you could get on now, Jane. You could get on, right? Like, you're going to get on now? And it was becoming like a bit of a joke. And the reason that I kept posting it and kept not getting on was because, sure, if you've started 2,000 horses, you might be faster than me, but I haven't. And I don't want to do that like that. I don't care about how fast it takes. And that's what we all have to get to. We have to be like attached to our own process and run your own race. And if I could be like a model for that to like 2 people, then so be it. That's what I want to model, because it's not my definition of success to get on my horse fast. It's interesting actually watching the Equus competition yesterday, and this isn't a reflection on anyone, but everyone claps when they get on. Like, that's the moment that needs to be applauded. And there's all these moments where I think, wow, look at that really soft connection they've got, or the way that she yielded her horse across. And to me, that's like the clap moment. But we define, like, we're on the ground and we're in the saddle, and now she's made it, that's like point one. Do you know, we miss all these little incremental points in between that actually are the big little stuff. That's what I call it. So I've got a little bit off track there, sorry. But the reason for that, like, only going as far as the next good step is like a fear bomb eradicator. Because basically, I would have a conversation, and someone would say to me, and this is the other thing, I don't know it all. Like, I don't know how to start my own horse, but I know people around me that have started a lot of horses, and I was like in their ear holes. I'm like, watch this, check this out, can you see something that I'm overlooking? Like, I was constantly asking questions and very, very open to feedback. Like, I'm like, okay, thank you, that's great, I'll try that tomorrow and I'll do that. And it was such an exciting process. Like, I've learnt so much, it's not anywhere near finished. But I would say things like someone would, my friend Katie sent me a video of a horse, a breaker from way back. He lies on his horses and like pats them down, and you get to the point where you slide off their bum. So you jump up on the initial part and then you pat them over, and then you get to the point where you're lying completely across them and you slide off their bottom. And I watched that and I was like, yep, okay, let's do that. And so I did it, and it took me 3 days, and I'm sliding off a 17-hand bottom. And it was amazing. But if you just only go as far as the next good step. You know, I could tell when he wasn't comfortable with something. And so by the time I got to the point where I was doing the thing that I thought I couldn't do, it was easy. It was just a matter of trust, but the trust came easily because I could read what he was telling me based on the fact that I'd negotiated that resistance line. And by the time I got to that stage, it wasn't a thing. But if you were to ask me prior to starting the process if it was a thing, I would say I was afraid about that. I didn't let that stop me, but I only went as far as the next good thing. I didn't do it all in one session, you know, like I just broke it down, and that's fine. So that process it's a constant negotiation with your focus, with how it is you're talking to yourself and how it is that you're presenting. And I think that if we can get attached to different models of horsemanship where we're often only looking at the pros or the experts who do this all the time and things happen quite fast, that is not always how it has to be. And we haven't seen the 30 years before that where they were practicing in different ways. And so just define for yourself what success looks like. Break it down and say, well, this is the point that I'm at. And don't let that be, this is what happens mentally, the defining point for everything that comes after. You know, so you're afraid now, all of a sudden in your head you're going to be afraid forever. Might as well sell your horse, can't do it, waste of time, rotting in the paddock, all of that sort of thing. It's like, well, you're afraid now, but that's okay. Let's just make that movement hop towards the next direction that might be just based on you consistently catching your horse. Like, if that is your comfort zone right now, then you actually have to start at that place, but do that consistently. You know, we sort of get a bit like here or there, all or nothing, where we need to get into the middle zone with that and actually start to action things. That's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you're interested in working together or are dealing with fear currently and can't seem to navigate your way through, I really encourage you to check out Joyride, my Confident Rider membership program. You can do that by jumping on my website, confidentrider.online/Joyride, and all of the info is there for you to sign up. Or feel free to flick me an email, jane@confidentrider.online, and we can chat. Have a fabulous day, and I look forward to hanging out with you in the next episode.